Welcome back. You know, this administration loves to tell us how we should do everything in our lives, especially how and where we should live. Well, here to talk with me about the Department of Housing and Urban Development's new proposed role of fair housing is Stanley Kurtz, author of Spreading the Wealth: How Obama is Robbing the Suburbs to Pay for the Cities. Stanley, welcome.
Eric, thanks so much for having me.
Great to have you back. You know, I love your book. As I said last time you were on, Spreading the Wealth. I read it in October 2012, right before the election. It chilled me to my core, Stanley. And now I have a recent news item here from a few weeks ago, and the first thing I thought of was Stanley's book, Spreading the Wealth. Here's just a little summary. HUD, Housing and Urban Development, their new fair housing rule will provide data taken from the census for every neighborhood in the country using a mapping tool. It requires grantees, such as cities, that receive federal housing funds to further fair housing. And Stanley, it seems to me what that means. The government's going to map out every neighborhood, the Obama administration, in the country. And if there's a neighborhood they don't like that isn't diverse enough or doesn't have enough low-income housing, they're going to kind of move in and impose their will.
Well, that's it, Eric. And this new regulation, this new federal housing regulation, is remarkably ambitious. It's hard to see it at first, but it does a number of things. First of all, it takes a suburb which has absolutely no record of housing discrimination and nonetheless forces it to build a lot of public housing targeted at minorities. But that's really just the beginning. And when you really study this new regulation, you see that it's part of a much broader Obama administration strategy to transform the way Americans live. And the idea here is to block the development of suburbs and to press as many people as possible into super dense urban areas where effectively they'll be forced to give up their cars. Now, how does this regulation do that? Well, it redefines the idea of fair housing by saying, well, you can't have fair housing unless that housing is located near public transportation. And you can't have fair housing unless that housing is located near a dense downtown district where there are a lot of jobs. So this new regulation is going to put tremendous pressure on cities and suburbs to build up little mini downtowns near their transportation stops. And that's going to change the way we live.
Very interesting, Stanley. You know, the American dream is, and it's been this way since after World War II. You work your butt off. You have no money growing up. I grew up in working class Philadelphia. My family had no money, but you work your butt off and you have a little bit of success. And you want to buy a house out in the suburbs with a nice yard, a white picket fence to raise your children in a safe place. And basically it seems like what you're telling us is the Obama administration kind of wants to turn that American dream on its head.
Well, that's it, Eric. The Obama administration really is hostile to that traditional vision of the suburb where you have a freestanding house and a yard where most people like to raise their kids. The Obama administration thinks that that's ecologically bad and socially bad. They want people to live in dense urban areas. And I'll give you an example of how they're trying to do this because it's playing out right now in the San Francisco Bay Area. And the Obama administration wants to replicate this throughout the country. Just this last month, a group of unelected bureaucrats in the San Francisco region approved something called Plan Bay Area. And what Plan Bay Area does is to declare that for the next 30 years, there cannot be any development of new suburbs. Instead, all the people who come in to the greater San Francisco region for 30 years are going to be channeled, most of them channeled into a few neighborhoods around public transportation in both cities and suburbs. And the problem with this is, of course, a lot of suburbs are beginning to rebel, and they're saying, hey, you know, we wanted to get away from that kind of living and come out here. But this new rule lets the Obama administration turn around and say, well, I'm sorry you don't like it, but if you don't build up these little mini Manhattans near your transit stops, we just might haul you off to court for violating fair housing laws. We could even dock your federal funding, your transportation funding, your housing funding, your community development block grants. And so you're going to have to knuckle under and do what these planners say.
Stanley, to me, it's sinister. I mean, the federal government is mapping every neighborhood. in the United States. And if that neighborhood doesn't conform to their standard of what's fair and equal, they're going to literally come in and try to change the face of that neighborhood through government decree.
That's right, Eric. And another one of these programs that the public just isn't paying attention to is called the Sustainable Communities Initiatives. These names sound so nice and so harmless, but the Sustainable Communities Initiative funds planning grants in regions across the country, planning grants that are going to come out and essentially be clones of this Plan Bay Area that I told you about. Now, technically, those planning grants will just be recommendations. They won't have any power. But these new rules and regulations allow the federal government to put the carrot and stick to force suburbs to go along with this new plan. And so in this way, the Obama administration could truly transform America. And we're not debating it. The president tends not to talk about it. This is a key part of his policy, but he knows how politically controversial it is, so he tends not to mention it. We really need a national debate on this issue.
How do you think, Stanley, you can't play psychiatrist here, but based on your extensive research in writing Spreading the Wealth, how do you think President Obama views the suburbs? As you know, as you said, a guy who wants to fundamentally transform America. What is a guy like him, what is his view of the suburbs? What do they represent to a guy like Barack Obama?
Well, Eric, I write a lot about this in Spreading the Wealth, and it's amazing if you actually go back and look at President Obama's own writings, how much he has to say about the suburbs. In fact, that's one of the things that drew him to Reverend Wright initially, was that Reverend Wright didn't like suburbs, and he didn't like even the idea of African Americans moving to the suburbs. Now, these radical Saul Alinsky-style community organizers that trained and mentored Obama, they blamed the suburbs for the problems of the cities, because when people move out to the suburbs, they take their tax money with them. So those organizers who trained and mentored Obama developed a whole series of strategies for undercutting the political and economic independence of the suburbs. And what I discovered in writing Spreading the Wealth is that Barack Obama bought into all that. It moved him deeply. And he bought into an idea that the suburbs really shouldn't exist in an ideal world. And the strategies that he's applying in his administration now are really the very same strategies that his Alinskyite organizing buddies first cooked up to undercut the political and economic independence of the suburbs. I lay it all out in Spreading the Wealth.
I mean, I remember reading your book in October, right before the election, saying, my God, if he wins, we are in for it. What you're talking about right now, Stanley, what we're talking about, are you starting to see, now that Obama is reelected, are you starting to see this plan put into action? Where do you see it working right now?
Well, it's playing out, as I mentioned, in the Bay Area, but it's
Sure.
also now coming to the Minneapolis-St. Paul region. There's another big regional plan that is state-mandated, but it's also supported by a federal grant from the Obama administration. It's going to, in very similar ways to the San Francisco plan, impose this whole scheme of densifying the cities on Minneapolis-St. Paul. Now, Minneapolis and San Francisco are the areas where state law cooperates with the Obama administration the most.
Two
They are
very
the
liberal
models.
areas, of course.
It's going to take longer for the regional planning grants that are in other parts of the country to kick in, because they're not as good at developing these plans. It's going to play out over the next 3.5 years. But if the Obama administration is able to put these new regulations in place and establish the precedents without people noticing or fighting back, they're in trouble. There's a reason why President Obama doesn't talk about this. It's a political hot potato, and he doesn't really want people to know that he's pushing this. If we could just spark a national debate on this, that would be our best chance of blocking the Obama administration's plans.
I think it's going to be a situation, Stanley, where all of a sudden people are going to look around their neighborhood and say, my gosh, what is going on? Our crime rates are up. And this is not a racial thing, by the way. The Obama administration would like to portray it like that, but it is not a racial thing. And people need to understand that. This is a quality of life thing. So, Stanley.
Absolutely, Eric.
Yeah. We got to run, Stanley.
In fact, a lot of my... Absolutely, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thank you so much, my friend. The book is Spreading the Wealth. It's a great book. It's a chilling book, and you need to read it. Coming up, the militarization of American police forces. You won't